Welcome to the Homelab Show, episode 91. We're going to
Wow.
talk about CI/CD pipelines with Jay.
Yep. And among a few other things, smaller topics that I'll bring up as well.
Yeah, sometimes we're doing these shows where we're going to combine a few different of the smaller topics because there's just so many things to cover. And this is a one where I haven't built software from a professional standpoint in it's actually been 20 years because last time I did stuff was 2002 and 2001 working in corporate. So well,
So Orland C++, I think, or Turbo C, or
much worse. We were using a programming language called Progress. And oddly, I did some consulting with someone who's still using Progress as a language. I'm like, wow.
they're making progress with progress.
They're making progress with it. I loved all the puns we could play around with that. So my knowledge of this is a bit dated. Okay, a lot dated. 20 years is a long time. And there's been a lot of cool tools. Jay is familiar with these tools, so he's going to be leading the discussion on this.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, it'll be a progressive discussion.
Ah, yes. Now, good news is this is something, before anyone wonders, that is Homelab relevant because many of you are working towards or have a job doing some level of development, whether you're a developer or you interact with them. I think this is pretty relevant. That's why we chose it as a topic. And
Yep.
it's also just good to think about workflows you have for yourself, because something that gets Homelab people in trouble is not having documented workflows for things. So if you took an abstracted view of this from just documenting and thinking about how you work towards adding something to your Homelab, this can be very helpful for that.
Yeah, and also there's a very Homelab specific implementation that is going to be at the center of it. So what I think I'll do is kind of explain in general what it all is, and then we'll kind of just put it on the Homelab side of things, and then we'll see how that can actually help people out.
Yeah. So we'll just jump right into the show today. I didn't prepare to ad read. So, and we've done it enough this month. We've
Yeah.
got a quota. We have quotas in case anyone's wondering. That's how we keep the bills paid and the lights on here at the Home Lab Show. So let's just jump into the.
Well, what I was thinking is I'll just get through a couple of smaller topics that I wanted to bring up. I have something kind of fun that people can try as well that I thought would be kind of cool, and then we could jump into it. So
Yeah.
the first thing I wanted to bring up was Chat GPT. I know, bandwagon alert, right? But Zhao from my other podcast had the suggestion. I don't remember if he mentioned it on the air or not, but he just gave me a little challenge, a little friendly nudge. He's like, just paste your SSHD config file into Chat GPT and ask it how to further enhance your security. I thought, well, that's a very interesting thing to do.
Mm.
So I will, of course, put a disclaimer out here that do not trust your company's or personal security to Chat GPT. I'm not telling you that it's so accurate that if Chat GPT says you're secure, you're secure. I'm not saying that, but it could be a way of getting some additional feedback. Now, you will get mixed results. That's Chat GPT right now. You can ask it the same question twice and get different answers both times. It's just how it is. So don't take it as gospel, but it might be something to do. And also be careful when you're just throwing your config files out there on the internet. I'm not saying to have a free for all there either. But if you put it in Chat GPT and ask it how you could further enhance your security, you might get some pointers, or maybe not. Again, Chat GPT.
Yeah.
Now, on my end, it didn't really give me much because I've been going over my SSHD config for a long time. And it told me to disable password authentication, which was already disabled. So there's a little margin for error there. But I thought it might be fun, if you put in a config file to Chat GPT and ask it how to secure it, it'd be interesting to see what comes back. And if something interesting comes back, let us know in the feedback, because I think that would be a great idea, is just to see if you had any success with this, if it found anything that you didn't think of yourself. That would be pretty cool. Just let us know in the feedback. And by the way, feedback. Come on, guys. We need more feedback.
Yeah.
So we like to answer questions.
Feedback at the Home Lab Show. So that's
Yeah,
that's where you can
exactly.
email us feedback. We made it easiest by saying email. One more comment on ChatGPT. I kind of like the joke of when you say ChatGPT is smarter than a human, you do have to specify which human it's smarter than. But that being said, it really does a good job on deterministic things better than usual. So code is one of those things that's less opinion and more accuracy. So I've actually found, especially since they moved to Chat GPT-4, when you ask it some of the code questions, and my staff has been using it for this, it gives really good answers. They were dealing with, and I don't know if they solved it just yet, but I know they were talking about a timeout script. And I'm always like, guys, ask Chat GPT a lot of this stuff. It can do
Yep.
this. I've had it write several things for me because I'm like, wow, this just does it. And one of the things it will note is when you tell it to do something, I even tried to get it to do something insecure. I thought I was just going to make a video dumping on Chat GPT. There's a reason that video doesn't exist is because it won the argument with me. It would not easily let me. You really had to try to make it do something insecure. I was trying
Right.
to write some bad firewall rules and things like that, but it's actually very good. It even gives suggestions for firewalls or how to set something up. We were actually shocked at the accuracy by which it could give you some advanced instructions on how to set something up in PF Sense. So I think it's a great tool for the Homelab people, because if you are one of the people who are just getting started in this and you need some help, staring at a blank sheet of paper is hard. Getting that first form written for the code is hard.
Mhm.
I'll have ChatGPT build you a Python script to do the thing you're asking it. And even if it's not 100% correct, if it's 90% there, you're 90% further than you were before you asked the question. So I'm still bullish
Yep.
on using it, especially in home lab and learning environments, because it also makes notes. It does better than senior developers do at putting comments in code. I'm telling you what the code does, which is great for learning, bad for senior
It
developers.
really is. It's a fun tool, and I'm interested to see where it goes. It's gonna be our overlord at some point. We all know that, right? I'm just trying to be on good terms with it ahead of time.
Yeah, we're trying to be
Of course,
nice.
I don't actually believe that, but it is kind of fun to play around with that sci-fi thing.
Yeah.
I just don't want to get to a point where I'm on there and I'm asking it something and it says, "I can't do that, Jay."
Yeah,
Little
when
sci-fi reference with a name swap on that one. But
right.
anyway, just thought I'd mention that as
Yep.
a fun thing that might be within reason. Obviously, if there, I don't know
Yeah.
why you'd have anything proprietary in your config file. You shouldn't, but just be mindful of that, and maybe you might get some pointers, or maybe you might get some nonsense. Either way, it's fun.
Yep. All right. What's the next
So,
line item
the
here?
next line item, I just wanted to mention Cubic really quick. I had some time to play with this, and this is how I created the Ubuntu Flatpak remix recently, was with this tool, which allows you to grab an Ubuntu ISO image and just do whatever you want. You could just choose different packages that are in there by default. Basically, make your own custom version of an Ubuntu ISO. So if you wanted to create an Ubuntu ISO for whatever reason in your home lab, it might be a tool that you could use for that. It's pretty fun, actually. If nothing else, it's pretty easy to use. It's like a little wizard. You just keep clicking next and just tell it what you want. And what's really cool is it'll actually allow you to test your distro in a new window that comes up, where you can actually play with your distro before you finalize it and then create the ISO image. So I think it's just so cool, and I think people should check it out. I'm not saying everyone should start their own distribution, but if you wanted to just, there's like a couple of things you do with an Ubuntu release, remove this, add that, whatever it is, you could just have that right in the ISO and just not have to do that when you go to deploy it on an instance. So just thought I'd throw that out there. It's called Cubic. It's available on GitHub, and it's a lot of fun.
We'll throw a link to it in the show notes. And how long until it replaces, Jay, your Ansible poll that you're doing?
It can't, and the reason why is because it's the most I would do is implement Ansible into it, because it doesn't do full configuration management. I mean, you probably could, but respinning a new ISO every single time you make changes to your Ansible would be really hard to do. And I think that we'll come back to that thought, actually, because I think that's a
Okay.
good thought to explore, the CI/CD thing, because it kind of goes in there, plays pretty well with that. So the last subtopic to bring up, which is also going to have a question to the audience as well. But I just wanted to mention this for those of you that haven't heard of it before. It's called Barrier. I use it
Mm.
in the office, in the studio here. That's how I record, or I manage the recording PC and my desktop with the same keyboard and mouse. So basically, I could just be here, I could be there. I just move the mouse off the screen, and then it's on the other screen, and I'm controlling my other computer. Then I just move it over, and I'm controlling a different machine. So it's basically like network or networking your keyboard and mouse between two different computers, which is really cool. So, I mean, right now it's not working. So I have this little small keyboard here that I'm trying to use just in case I need to control the other computer. Because the issue, and this is the question I was going to bring up to the audience, if there's a easy solution to this, is what do you do if you have more than one computer? I have
Yeah.
my main desktop that is able to control my other desktop, which is the recording computer. But what if I'm using my laptop, for example? Okay, it's really hard, as far as I've read, to have two computers sharing a keyboard and mouse. So there's got to be an easy solution to this, and I have to be overcomplicating this. So the idea being, what if I have my laptop plugged in and I want to control the same computer at the laptop that I also control at the desktop using something like Barrier? But obviously, most people aren't going to have a complicated need like I do. So I think for most people, Barrier by default is just a good recommendation to the audience if you didn't already know that it exists. I'm trying to remember what it was called before it switched to Barrier. It wasn't. Was it Synapse? No,
It
it
had a
wasn't.
different name before, but
Something like Synapse, or it wasn't Synaptic because that's the apt tool on Debian. Something like that. I know someone in
it
the audience will
some of the
definitely know what
audience
I'm
will
talking
remember its
about.
original name. By the way, if you're looking for a video on how to use Barrier, Veronica Explains, good friend
Oh,
of the
yeah.
channel. She's got a great video on that topic. But we're looking for some solutions from the brain trust of our audience here,
Yep,
and we'll talk about it in the next episode. But yeah, different. Look at what Barrier is. If you have a solution that works the same as Barrier, or tips and tricks for using Barrier, we're all ears on that. I'm
yep,
interested as well.
yep. So, we're gonna get into the CI/CD topic, and I wanna prefix this by saying it's not gonna be a deep dive. I'm gonna talk about, everything I know off the top of my head, obviously, but, we could go deep into individual solutions in future episodes. This is gonna be more of a foundational thing just to kinda first talk about what it is, which is gonna give everyone the question, "Well, what the heck does this have to do with me if I'm not a software engineer?" But we'll get to that. So, continuous integration, continuous development. To really simplify this, I mean, just imagine you have a team of software engineers, and they're basically releasing software. At some point, compiling testing, that can be a little difficult and time consuming. So one of the ideas that you have build agents. So when you do a git push, for example, or you merge something, then you could have something compile that and email email the developer or whoever it is that's managing the project. It was successful. It was a failure, whatever it was. So you fix your code, push it again, failure, fix it, push it again, keep repeating, and eventually, everything's green and everything's working. I worked in a development team where we had, like, I want to say 12 build agents on a Team City server, Team City being one of the solutions, at least back then. I haven't looked into it recently. But these build agents would constantly be building code because this company was always releasing new code. It was great to see this. And if there's any problems, then before the software got, released, it would be caught because it's being built, and tested beforehand. Obviously, there's a lot more than just continuous integration, continuous development in their pipeline, but that's just the subject we're talking about today. So one of the popular solutions is Jenkins, which is basically my go-to. It's open source. It's easy to use. It's a little weird at first to kind of wrap your head around this style because you have to set up a build agent. It's not hard to do. It's just different. And it also has a built-in build agent, which is a little interesting to me because I always think of the server as the server and the agents as the agent. Having an agent on the server is weird, but that's another story. But basically, you can set up agents to do whatever you want when it comes to building things. But I mean, that's a gross oversimplification of what CI/CD is. It's a very powerful tool in the enterprise for software engineering and is probably very transformative as well. But one of the topics that we need to get into is, what does this have to do with Homelab? Because, am I trying to say everyone needs to start writing C, C++, and Python? I mean, you absolutely could because it's a lot of fun, but that's not for everyone. So bringing it back to Homelab, it's often the case, I think, where you run into a situation where the work of maintaining a home lab or your configuration management code could be work in and of itself. And at what point are you spending more time managing your Ansible, Chef, Puppet, whatever it is? And you're spending more time doing that than you are enjoying your home lab. And then you're basically doing the work of a software company at that point. Sure, you're not necessarily developing software unless you are, but you're still writing code. I mean, configuration management is code, especially considering Ruby is used in a lot of these. So it's code is code. It's code. And it does kind of cross that line at some point, in my opinion. And I'll use myself as an example. Um, I think I did use this example for something in the past. So some people that have been listening probably already know this. But when it comes to my Ansible config, it's basically it does everything: workstations, servers. It knows how to set up a workstation and a server independently. It knows the difference, and it's great. It's completely hands off. But the problem started when, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and harder to manage. So what do I do? And what makes it even harder is I support Arch Linux, Debian, Ubuntu, Pop! OS, and I'm probably going to add Fedora to it as well here pretty soon. So then it creates a situation where every time I implement something into Ansible, I need to know if it's going to work on Debian. Is it going to work on Ubuntu? Is it going to work on Fedora? That's kind of annoying because I have to test it that many times, and that creates a situation where every every change I make to Ansible becomes a lot of work because it has to pass each of those tests. So what I decided to do was create my own CI/CD pipeline, but I kind of hesitate to call it that because I'm not using Jenkins in production yet. I probably will, and I'll come back to Jenkins later. But it just it's very very basic. So but what I've done is I've created a reference VM, a vanilla reference VM for each of the distributions that I support, and I create a branch called staging, and then I basically I develop against that branch, and these instances check that branch out. Everything else will check out the main branch. That's the primary one that production gets. But when I'm developing something, I just develop against staging, and since these instances check out staging because Ansible pull is local, not the other way around to the server, then they'll run it against themselves. And I have something called pushover for notifications. If it's a success or a failure, it'll let me know on my phone, which is pretty cool. Every time I submit something via Ansible or I push a change to that branch, I get a notification on my phone from each one of these servers that it passed or failed. And then I could look at the failure because the message is right on my phone. What the heck happened? And there's the error message. Oh yeah, that's right. I had an extra pipe symbol, and this actually happened yesterday. And I didn't catch this myself, but it failed the build, and I figured out that's why from the error message. Delete it, push it again. Then that server comes back and says that it's successful. And at that point, I have a system where I just simply push out something to my Ansible config or my repository, and then each of these reference VMs will let me know how Ansible did on those machines. And that saves me from pushing something to production and having 30 machines emailing me complaining that something's not working. I'd rather it be somewhere between 1 and 4 test machines and everything complaining and things falling over, which is just going to be a dreadful thing to manage. So, got to hydrate.
No, it's really interesting. It's all the testing that goes
Yeah.
involved in there, and this is makes or breaks your software or your deployments because we can't just deploy everything in production, especially once you get
Right.
bigger. You have to really schedule, so you want to do as much testing ahead of time to be as not disruptive as possible.
Yeah, exactly. And I have a feeling that there's at least one person that's going to our feedback email right now, and they're probably writing something along the lines of, "Jay, you wouldn't need all that if you just like settle on one distribution, then it wouldn't matter." And if someone's going to say that, they're probably right. But my mentality about Linux distributions is that you should never have just one. You can have a primary. You should always have at least one secondary because your primary distribution could change at some point to where you don't want to use it anymore because the company, or if it's a company behind it, might decide something that doesn't go along with what you want. For example, CentOS and their move to CentOS Stream. Um, I have a feeling if I was to ask people before then if CentOS as they knew it was going to go away, they say no, it's my only distro. That's all I use, and that's all I'm ever going to use. And after that announcement, oh, maybe I should switch. And then when it comes to companies, they have a hard time switching between distributions. It's not an easy thing to do. But if you're always maintaining reference configurations for at least one secondary, I could change my main distro which currently is Ubuntu server on the servers and then Pop! OS on the desktop. I could change that tomorrow if either one of those goes a direction I don't want. And I maintain those configs, and it especially helps with the channel because if I want to have an Arch Linux config set up to go over that in a video, then my Ansible takes care of that for me, and I can easily do that. So there is value in, at least one other distribution. But then again, if you're, using another distribution as your plan B and you're using the same Ansible config, you're going to run into package names being different. You're going to run into config files maybe being named differently. It really depends. Each distribution's different there. So you have to test variables for one distribution versus another, and it just gets complicated. But having CI/CD in the Homelab is, I think, a great way to tackle this. But it goes even further because I haven't done this myself, but I've seen people use. No, actually, I have done this. I make so many videos, I can't even remember how many I actually do. I knew there's a reason I was thinking of this. I did it for Linode's channel, that's why. And I guess that's a spoiler if you didn't know that video was coming. But essentially, what it does is it sets up Jenkins with Terraform to build VMs through Jenkins. So imagine having a configuration with a API for your cloud provider if you have one, or even Proxmox if you don't. I imagine other virtualization solutions have an API as well. So imagine spinning up virtual machines by just going onto your Jenkins server, clicking one button, and then you just get an email, server's ready, here's the IP. You could absolutely do that with CI/CD. And you could argue that's not necessarily CI/CD. You're using Jenkins as more of a delivery service, but these tools, and that's why they're kind of hard to explain, they do more than just build your stuff. You could literally just execute, commands or something, or even use Jenkins as a basic Ansible server if you wanted to. But I figured it was probably a good idea just to kind of put this out there and get this idea into people's mindsets, especially if we explore these topics in deeper mentality later on, which, probably will, especially as I get more into Jenkins, which, how that goes. I'll probably have a video on it
Or a whole
again.
video
So,
series.
or maybe even a series. That's kind of how it goes. But these tools that are normally made for software engineers, if you just think about it a different way, it might be useful for us too. We're clever people. That's why we have a home lab, right? Because we're all very clever. So finding clever use of these tools is kind of the name of the game. And CI/CD might be a good way to automate some of the testing or even complete server builds if that's something that might solve your use case.
And I think it's always a goal to work towards because I'm going to work on soon the more basic versions of doing this. And you got to start somewhere. And I obviously am a big fan of XCPNG, but a lot of people get confused on how the templates work and how you build things. And sometimes people get a little lost on it. One of the things that having this allows me to iterate fast on, matter of fact, I have a friend who's been doing it in a more complicated way. He looked at mine and he goes, "Oh, that's kind of simple." So there's other ways to
Right.
do it, but it's all having that starting point because you want to be able to generate VMs fast. You want to be able to deploy fast to be able to get to the thing you wanted to do. I was doing a video just the other day on ArtWatch. I needed to create several different VMs, and I also needed to change the MAC address on those VMs. So it's always like looking at ways to make that simpler when you do it. If you didn't watch that video, if you change some of the prefixes, I was doing some Mac spoofing for fun. That's it,
What else would you do for fun, right? I
what
mean,
else you
this
do for
some
fun?
MAC addresses.
Right. Well, it was because we were identifying things by their MAC address and what they were. So all of a sudden, I had Lockheed Martin tactical systems showing up in my look. You've got. Would you like to know if these things have been added? This is. I think I want to rechange the Mac on my laptop, so everyone thinks that that Lockheed is now attached to their network because that just seems fun. Wait, is there a military company attached?
Oh my gosh,
Right.
the level of pranking. I'm not trying to be an enabler here, so
Yeah.
I should shut my mouth. 'Cause I'll get myself in trouble. But yeah, that's I mean, those are clever use cases as well. I think, just finding good use cases for this stuff is really fun. I wanted to mention someone in the chat room. Let's see if Jaden mentioned it's Synergy. That's right. That was the
Yeah.
original name for Barrier. They kind of forked over to Barrier at some point, and Barrier is kind of hard to find sometimes when you Google for it because it's such a generic word. You could find like a barrier for something, or the magic spell and the Final Fantasy series, which is like an alternative to the wall spell. You have the barrier spell, and then you have barrier for your keyboard and mouse, among many other uses for that word. So if it were me, I would have chose a more standout word for that project, but it is a good one nonetheless. If you could find it, you just search barrier keyboard and mouse, and we'll have a link in the description
Yeah.
for this as
It
well. If you want to check that out.
it's the same problem with there's always name collisions because apparently we can't come up with new words. So when we write new languages, we go, "Hey, Rust. This is a great name for a language, right?" Uh, no, you know how hard that was to
Yeah.
Google until it became popular?
Yeah. And music fans wonder why churches spelled the name of their band with a V instead of a U, and they literally said it's because it stands out in Google. That's why we did that.
Yes.
And businesses do that all the time. But Rust has gotten popular enough to where I think it's not going to be a problem for Rust at all.
Yeah,
So
I see a common a question here from Steven. I know he does some software development. He's commented on channel before here. I believe I've been working on a GitLab CI runner running to my OpenShift cluster this morning. So how does that work, Jay? Is this a good integration going with GitLab to because you just did a bunch of you did OpenStack, but didn't you look at
yeah.
OpenShift as well?
Well, so basically, yeah, I mean that is something that could be done. If you think about it, in the video, I walked through the process of, for example, setting up OpenShift on OpenStack, which was
Yeah,
a lot of fun to produce. Let me tell you, I had so many errors. It was like I think a 3-hour recording at least for a 1-hour video when I edited it down, because there's people think, oh, you always get it right the first time. That's what you see. But behind the camera, there's F-bombs and there's, oh my God, why don't you work? And then once I figure it out, of course, all that gets edited out and you see like all the successes. But anyway, the point is I did that manually, and I go through all the commands, but any of those commands you could script and have something like you know GitLab, for example, that by the way, that has CI/CD built into it as well. GitHub does as well. So there's solutions right in your repository managers for this too. So absolutely, that's something that you could do because there's an API. So you could hit the API. I want an OpenShift cluster. I want an OpenStack instance set up, or an OpenStack user security group or something like that. I would personally probably use Terraform as the bridge in between the two, because Terraform, you could test it against OpenStack and know that it works. And once you have that down, you put your Terraform configs in a repository, put that repository into Jenkins or whatever it is you use to know where that repository is. Pull down this repository, watch this repository when there's a change, or I give you the instruction to do your thing, activate the script and use Terraform, spin up an instance for me. And that's useful for home because you want to just test out a VM randomly, or even at work if you use it at work, because how many times, if you do this for a job, do you have someone at your desk that, can you build me a VM? Can you build me a VM? And pretty much you're just building VMs all day. At that point, you probably start automating it.
automation.
Yeah.
It goes outside the topic of the Homelab show because this is completely Tom and Jay problems. That's what we were discussing beforehand is our
Right.
whole automation doing build pipelines for creating content. So
Yeah. I mean, that is something that we talk about too.
the
A lot of
concept's the
those.
same though. We have a workflow that we have to go
Yep.
through and we're trying to, put that pipeline in place and make it as automated as possible. But some of the tools aren't there yet. The people who make video editing and audio software are not at the same level. The people who automated the Jenkins build system. There's no Jenkins version that we found yet that's quite as automated for the video production side.
Yeah, so we're having random conversations like,
Yeah.
I wonder if ProRes, if that's something I could record over 1 gig, even though I'm
Yeah.
editing it in 10 gig. That those questions kind of come up behind the scenes, and sometimes I wonder how many people care about that, because how many people has a problem that something like that would solve? I wouldn't think very many, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. Maybe me and Jay will co-opt a video on our workflow, not necessarily because you're a video editor and it's interesting, but maybe the tools, the true NASs we have, how we've got them all connected, how we have multiple computers sending to the NAS. And this could also be substituted out for things like a Synology.
Yeah.
But it's thinking about how you get that data from where it is, because maybe you work or as an IT administrator, and you're like, hey, I wonder how I can help the teams that do the media on the other side. So there might be some
Yep.
value in it, not as a Home Lab show, but just something me and Jay do on our channels. So, but that
Yep.
goes back to feedback at the Home Lab show. You can leave comments in this video. You can send feedback at the Home Lab show. Either one of those options will bring that data to us and let us know what you think of it.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. We want to do another Q&A, and our ability to do so depends on you. So,
Yeah, we like
um,
answering your questions. It's a lot of fun.
yeah, we like it a lot.
We love
It's
when
a
we
lot
had
of
them
fun.
ahead of time because that's when we get more in-depth answers because we have time to actually research and put things together.
Maybe one day we should just set up ahead of time a Q&A live, live Q&A clinic or computer home lab clinic or something, and come just bring all your stuff and let people know ahead of time so we,
Yeah, we'll do an
aren't
Ask the
searching
Expert
for
panel.
questions. But yeah.
We're here to solve your home lab issues.
Yep.
All right. Is there anything else we have, Jay?
And I could go all day, but I think that's our topic.
That's our topic for today. We kept it simple. We kept it short for you. Looking forward to hearing from everyone, and we'll join you next week.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you.